Hello everyone, my name is Enoch, and today I have a question for Bible-believing Christians. So to start off, I have a passage I want to read from the book of Matthew in the New Testament. And it's Matthew chapter 7, this is real short, verses 13 and 14, and this is Jesus talking. He says, "Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the way is broad, that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. For the gate is small, and the way is narrow, that leads to life, and there are few who find it." So based on this passage, what Jesus is saying is basically the way to destruction, which in today's terminology would be generally thought of as hell, is wide and broad, and the way to life is narrow and small. So we have the majority of people are going to end up on the wrong path, and the minority of people is going to end up on the right path. And this is pretty self-evident if you just look around at the world today. Most people are not Christians, and if you're a Bible-believing Christian, you probably don't think that just wearing a Christian name tag is enough to save you and let you into heaven, essentially. Maybe some people disagree with that. They think, hey, as long as you are a self-professing Christian, then you are saved. Definitely does not seem to be what the Bible teaches. But anyway, so we live in a world, if you are a Bible-believing Christian, then you live in a world where you believe that most of the world that we live in is going to hell. Now, the usual interpretation of hell is that it is a place of eternal torment where people will suffer endlessly and live forever in agony and torture, essentially. There's differing views on what exactly that looks like, but that's usually the typical interpretation of it. So if you believe this interpretation, then this challenge is specifically mostly extended to you. Are you happy believing that your version of Christianity is true? So you believe that you were fortunate enough to hear the message of salvation, to hear the gospel. It made sense to you. Something convinced you that it was true. You believed it, you accepted it, and you are now one of the few that are saved. And if you have worldly friends or people you love, family members that aren't saved, and them, along with most of the world, is going to burn in hell and suffer for all eternity. Now, whether you think this is true or not is not my question. My question is, if you think it's true, how are you ever happy in life? How are you ever happy believing this? How could you possibly want this to be true? Maybe you do think it's true, but how are you happy that it's true? How could you ever want this to be the reality that we live in? I really don't understand that. This is one of the things that drove me so crazy when I was a Christian is I grew up in the church my whole life. So I never really had worldly friends. So it wasn't until I started working a secular job that most of my friends became not Christian. And I thought to myself, I was fortunate enough to be born to two Christian parents who taught me the Bible my whole life, who raised me in church my whole life. So obviously, I accepted what they taught me to be true, and I believed it for myself. I accepted Jesus for myself. I dedicated my life to him. He meant the world to me. I gave my life for Jesus, essentially. I believed I had a personal relationship with God, that I was called and chosen, and all these things. But that's because the way I was raised. Like, how could it have been any other way? Like, my parents ingrained the Bible into me from the time I came out of the womb, practically. So, in that sense, I was just extremely lucky because I happened to be raised that way, and that's the way to be saved. And I thought to myself, all of my friends, these people that I love that are such good people and so supportive, well, good in the general societal definitions, that care about me and love me, they're all going to go burn in hell because they weren't as fortunate as I was. Because maybe they didn't hear a good demonstration of the gospel or a good version of it. And that messed with me so bad because at the time I still thought Christianity was true, but I'm like, this is awful. This is horrible. How am I supposed to be happy? How am I supposed to even cope with reality? Now, I had it a little better off because as a Christian, I believed in what's called annihilationism, which is the view that those who go to hell ultimately will cease to exist completely and they won't suffer endlessly forever. So that at least was like some compensation. But even then, it's like, how happy would you be believing that your loved ones or friends or most people are going to be thrown into a bonfire alive and burned to death? Like, that's still horrific. Especially when it's like you were so lucky, for some reason, you found a way out and you tried telling them about it, but they didn't believe you because they didn't see evidence for your claims. But you got lucky enough. You found this secret way out and you get to be spared from the fire, and they all are toast and they're all going to be thrown alive, bound hand and foot into a bonfire. And you're supposed to be happy because I'm saved, because I'm one of God's chosen, or I found salvation, or I found Jesus, and hey, praise the Lord. How does this make you happy? So I think the challenge is especially crucial for those who believe in an eternal torment. I can see why you believe your religion is true, but what I don't see is how anyone could ever be happy believing that. How could you ever celebrate salvation and the good news, and when most of the world doesn't get to experience that, and they won't, because according to Jesus, broad is the way that leads to destruction and many go through it, but only a few find the way that leads to life. Are you really happy that Christianity is true?